1 minute to abandon ship. The ship will automatically destruct in T-minus 1 minute.
I will win the crowd. I will give them something they've never seen before.
Indiana, we are simply passing through history. This is history.
Hold on to your butts.
Now, what shall we talk about?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the Duel of the Greats podcast, episode 8. It is on the run week, folks, and we're on the run to start this episode. I should call it the new and improved Duel of the Greats podcast. So just before we get started, even we'll throw it out there. So we've heard from a couple of you very dedicated fans out there that we have some the best parts of the show are when we are directly comparing and contrasting the two films against each other. So that's what the people want, the people that we've heard from anyway. And you know what? That's what we're going to give you. So we're shaking up the format a little bit this week. And we're what we've decided to do is, you know, if you've listened to the past 7 weeks, we will introduce the movies and we'll give some background, and then we'll talk about each movie individually, and then at the end we give our summation of whether, you know, we liked which one movie or the other better. So now what we've decided to do is we've decided to actually break the show up into different categories within each episode, and then we'll compare the movies directly to each other from within each category. So it's more of a categorical approach to the comparison as opposed to talking about the movies individually and then comparing them. So we're still going to have some fun facts from our local historian Steve here, but it's the professor himself will introduce our that's Nate Carter, by the way, is the professor. But he's going to introduce the categories for the shows. But this week, as I said, it's on the run week. We have Steven Spielberg's The Sugarland Express versus Ridley Scott's Thelma and Louise. And Steve, why don't you go ahead and take it away? Give us some interesting things that we may not know about these movies here.
All right. The masses have spoken, so we're going to give you all the bread and circuses that you require. You didn't want any highfalutin talk about themes and things like that. I mean, I guess we're still going to talk about themes, but you want blood, you want mano a mano, and okay, I may be overselling it. We're not going to get that bad, but instead of boring you to death with a whole bunch of history, which I love because I'm a historian, but I'm going to give you just a few little kind of fun things that I thought when researching these movies. As Jeff said, our first movie is The Sugarland Express, which is arguably Steven Spielberg's first movie. We did Duel as his first movie, which was his first feature length, but this is his first feature length motion picture that was released in theaters and not on TV. And in a lot of ways, this was his first true movie making experience, with a big crew and everything that entails. So that's kind of where he's coming from with that. It's 1974, is when it was released. It's going up against Thelma and Louise, which probably most people have heard of. Ridley Scott's 1991 crime drama. Obviously not his first movie. He'd been doing quite a bit up to that point. But Sugarland Express, going back to it, I got 3 facts for you. One of the first days of shooting, Robert Zanuck, 20th Century Fox president, son of famous Daryl Zanuck, said of this youngster, Steven Spielberg, he said he didn't think anyone knew the mechanics of movie making as well as he did. I'm talking about Steven Spielberg. This is, remember, essentially his first movie. And he basically blew the socks off of everybody that saw him when he was there in terms of just controlling the set and working with everyone, getting people in the right places. So that just shows you the level of command that he had even at this young age. It's really quite astounding. I guess it shows kind of his background, how much he'd been immersed in movie making and all that. He just soaks things up like a sponge. 2, So the Sugarland Express, if you haven't seen it, again, why are you listening to this? But if you still want to stick with us, it essentially is about a husband and wife that take a cop hostage and drive across Texas. They're trying to get their baby back, and they're going to get the baby. It was taken away by CPS, basically Child Protective Services. Anyway, in the movie, Goldie Hawn, the mother, is kind of the prime mover and shaker. She gets this whole thing started, gets the ball rolling, so to speak. In real life, this is based on a true story. In real life, it was the father that kind of took the reins. I'm using a lot of cliches, but the father is the one that started the chase and got kind of dragged the wife along with him. His name was Bobby Dent, and he was spoilers. I don't know if Jeff, did you get the spoiler at the beginning? I don't remember, but spoiler warning again. If you're here and you haven't watched it, just go watch it. But he dies. The dad dies. Bobby Dent, gunned down. This is the fun fact for you. The name of the sheriff who killed him, E.T. Elliott, which, if you're a Steven Spielberg fan, which I would assume you are, those should ring a bell. Elliott is the main character in E.T., in case you didn't put that together. And this was where Spielberg actually got the inspiration for the name. It's funny the things that stick in people's head. He must have just read that when he was first researching this, and he just was like, I could use that somewhere else. Anyway, another fun fact, at least I think so, they really, really experimented with different ways to shoot these shots. And one of the things he came up with was the cop car that they're in for much of the movie. They took the wheels off. It's a real car. They took the wheels off of it, mounted it on a trailer, and dragged it along behind another car. But they put rails on either side of the car so that they could move the camera back and forth on a dolly on the trailer while the car is moving. I thought that was really, really cool. I don't know if maybe that's very common. I don't know. Nate, the professor, might have to weigh in on that. Nate, is that something that you've ever heard of? It seems like a really, really
more on
technique.
Like current productions. I think it was kind of a novelty at the time. I think it was sort of a newer thing at the time. They did a lot of stuff, which we'll get into, about how they sort of shot in and around the car and directed actors in the car in Sugarland Express. But
yeah, it's
more on that, and more on that in a moment. To be continued.
I guess it was also the first time they used the Panaflex, which is, I guess, a really famous camera because it was so light and was able to do a lot of things that other cameras couldn't. But anyway, the Panavision company picked this movie to be kind of their test case for this famous camera that has like revolutionized filmmaking. I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass. Nate can tell you a lot more about it. Anyway, the movie, it only wound up with $7.5 million box office. So, a real barn burner. People were rushing to the theaters to see this thing. It was a critical and commercial disappointment, but it has kind of lingered as an interesting touchstone in Steven Spielberg's catalog. In some ways, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about that later. It only won one award, Best Screenplay at 1974 Cannes Film Festival. So there you go. All right. Hopefully you guys found this as entertaining as I did. If not, write in and tell me that my fun facts are not fun or interesting, and I'll come up with other ones. Thelma and Louise is our next film. 3 fun facts. So the screenwriter, Callie Curry, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This was her first screenplay. And, again, we'll get into the details later. But for someone's first attempt at a screenplay, this seems like an incredible job, incredible ability and natural talent that just kind of poured out of her one day when she was driving home. Obviously, she didn't write it all in one day, but that's where it came from.
Don't write and drive, people.
Yes,
please.
Do not do that. We'd be irresponsible if we didn't tell you that. Or text. Let's see. 2. Let's see. Ridley Scott, he actually originally was producer on this movie. He and his brother had just formed one of their original production companies. And they were looking for, basically they wanted to keep the pipeline full. And so they were kind of looking at anything and everything that came their way. And some producers that also worked with him kicked this to him. And he thought it sounded great. And he's like, all right, we'll sign up. We'll produce it. And they went through like 3 or 4 directors interviewing for him. And just nobody quite was wanting to do what he wanted to do with it, which essentially was leave it alone and do it how the screenplay was written. people wanted to change the ending, change the characters, change all kinds of things. And finally he was like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna do it myself, which turned out to be a really really great thing. So that's, I thought was interesting. 3, how different would this movie have been if instead of Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis you had Jodie Foster and Michelle Pfeiffer, which almost happened, or Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn? Look at that connection. What do you guys think about that? That almost happened as well. But it didn't, and so we got this amazing pairing that we have. Also, Billy Baldwin was almost cast in the Brad Pitt role of JD. Think of how cinematic history would have changed if Billy Baldwin had been JD in this movie instead of Brad Pitt. This was Brad Pitt's big break, if you didn't know that. So he could still be some obscure former Missouri Tiger guy working in Hollywood as a busboy, but nope, he beat out Billy Baldwin mostly because of Gina Davis. Actually, she clicked with Brad Pitt, which I think you can kind of see on screen, obviously, and she said nope, I want him, and that's what they did. So finally, you get a bonus one. There's a scene where Christopher McDonald, the shitty Daryl character, Gina's
Shooter
Davis's,
McGavin.
Yes, Shooter McGavin. He finishes eating his pieces of shit for breakfast and he walks outside of his house and he goes to get in his car and he trips over a pile of shit. Not real shit this time. Look exciting or something like that. I don't know. Some people are working on his house and they've piled a bunch of stuff by his car. He trips over it, falls on his butt, and he gets mad and he gets in his car and drives away. It's a pretty fun little humorous aside in the movie. Kind of sets the tone for his character. I guess that was all real. And he just stayed in character while he fell over. And so they kept the cameras rolling. They're like, this is good. Let's keep it. So anyway, it made $45 million on a $16.5 million budget. So it was pretty successful. And it obviously was a huge hit critically. People love it. It's in the Library of Congress, for God's sakes, the National Film Registry. It won an Oscar for screenplay and had 5 other nominations, including both main actresses were nominated. So, quite the movie. That's what you got. Did you guys find it interesting?
And Ridley Scott himself.
Oh yeah, sorry, Best Director. One of his director noms. That is only no. I should know that off the top of my head.
I think he was nominated for Gladiator and Black Hawk Down as well, at least.
Yeah, we can look that up. Maybe Brandon can find that out.
Yeah,
for
good
us.
call. How many Best Director nominations has Ridley Scott had? I have another interesting fact.
Hit me.
So, of the 4 main characters that we have in these movies, right? You got your, Goldie Hawn, William Atherton, Susan Sarandon, Gina Davis. 3 of the 4 have red hair. If you remember your Punnett squares from Brandon has confirmed 3 best director noms from Ridley Scott. But nice. If you remember your Punnett squares from high school biology, you know that red hair is a recessive trait.
What are
and the odds of having 3 out of 4 people in any given scenario having red hair is very much a very, very low probability. So here we are, right? We're making history.
It's like the stars aligned.
It truly has. Yeah, man, not only did Brandon confirm that he was right, but I was right in all 3 movies. Gladiator.
Can I add one more fact?
Please do.
So just adding fact. It is to this day, it is the most recent film to have 2 actors nominated in the same category for either Best Actor or Best Actress. Both of the actresses were nominated for Best Actress. Interestingly, Jodie Foster was originally supposed to appear in this movie, and they both lost to Jodie Foster for Silence of the Lambs.
Ooh, that is a good fact.
Man, and then what if Gina Davis or Susan Sarandon would have been in that movie? Susan Sarandon eventually won an Oscar, but Gina Davis
she won one later. There's so many Oscar winners in these 2 movies.
Harvey Keitel, Gina Davis, or not Gina Davis, Susan Sarandon.
Gina Davis,
Goldie
she's
Hawn.
also an Oscar winner. She had just won an Oscar coming off of it. The Accidental Tourist was the film she had done before this that she won an Oscar for.
Really? I didn't think she ever won.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so she
So yeah, the only non-Oscar winner is good old William Atherton there, who is I know him as well, I shouldn't say I know him now because I can't remember the name of the character, but the lead scientist from Biodome, But as Steve and I talked about today, he's also the pushy reporter from Die Hard, and he's pencil neck EPA guy from Ghostbusters.
I think of those three things, like, you're the only person that came up with Biodome first. Like, everybody else is going to be like, oh, he's the guy from Die Hard.
Love me some Biodome. Well, Biodome is the biggest of those three roles. Biodome is definitely the biggest role that he had. He's at the most screen time from that one. So yeah, anyway, now let's we've got Nate to talk about our new approach here with the categories. Nate, lay it on us. What are the categories we're talking about this week?
So every week we will have some variation of these three categories, the following three categories. The first one will be exploration of theme. Second category will be visual storytelling. The third category will be characterization or acting, directing actors when we think that is relevant. We also have tacked on here, not this week, but we might occasionally throw in a random category if there's some sort of specific cinematic thing that they're both trying to do. So for this week, our three categories for exploration of theme, we are going to talk about the family you make and perhaps the desperation of modern life. Visual storytelling, we are going to talk about chase scenes, particularly car chase scenes, of which are featured heavily in both of these movies. And for characterization acting, we're going to talk finally about something that I think we have teased for several weeks now. Both of these directors' treatment of female characters. Something that I think particularly for Steven Spielberg at various points in his career has maybe been a little bit criticized for. Maybe Ridley Scott as well. Obviously, they are both male directors, and they've been directing movies for several decades now. But I think this is a really, really good week to talk about not just their treatment of female characters for these two movies, but just kind of overall for their whole career and maybe how that has evolved a little bit. But looking at category number one, our exploration of theme, the family you make, and the desperation of modern life. In Sugarland Express, we have a family, technically a married couple, but they have lost custody of their child, and they are literally trying to piece their family back together by driving, across Texas and getting their child back, who is currently in a foster home. Then in Thelma and Louise, you have this friendship that kind of evolves into this familial relationship where Gina Davis's character is technically married, but her husband is a real jerk and kind of treats her like crap. Susan Sarandon has this boyfriend that kind of wants to be close to her, and she kind of has this on-again, off-again thing with, and he's played by Michael Madsen. So I'm curious as to, looking at this for just that exploration of theme, which director do you think maybe does it better for these two movies, and which director do you think does it better across their whole career?
So I suppose I'll start. So I think that from my standpoint here, from watching these two movies, I think Thelma and Louise, in terms of like family you make, being on the run, that type of a thing, like I think that captures those themes much, much better than Sugarland Express. And I say that because for me, the big issue I had with Sugarland Express, tell me if you guys felt this way. All right. I literally wrote down after like, I don't know, maybe half hour or so of the movie. I literally wrote down, is this a comedy? Like it had a lot of really weird comedic beats to it. It did not feel like it was taking itself seriously. They had the whole bit with the old couple that they after they escape from prison, which was super easy, by the way. After they escape from prison, they get in this car with these old people. They're like, hey, you're going the same way as we are. Can we hitch a ride? And they say, sure. And they're in the car. And the old, the old guy is driving like 8 miles an hour. He's looking in the back seat, trying to converse with them, and every cars are weaving all over. There's this line of cars behind him, and then they flash to his wife, the old lady, and she's gripping the dashboard like, oh my god, you're going too fast. And it all plays for comedy. And then they get pulled over by the cops. The old couple gets out. They steal the car away from the old couple, and then the cop says, stay right here to the old couple. And then he leaves. And it's like, okay, maybe that was just a small bit or whatever. Then they come back to him later and they're on the side of the road and they're bickering like an old married couple about staying here. And then another cop comes up and is like, oh, are you guys the store they stole the car from? And they're like, yeah, that's us. And he goes, stay right here. And he leaves again. And, you know, I just thought that whole thing, and so much of the movie, it didn't end. It got a little bit more intense as it went on, but there were still a lot more parts in the movie, far more parts than I anticipated, of just seeming humor. And it was the score, I felt, underscored that as well. The score was a little bit more bouncy, a little bit more bubbly than I think you would expect from people breaking out of prison, going possibly to their doom as they try and go and take back their son. And it was that whole thing. I just really kept taking me out of it. And I was like, why are they playing this? Like they stop at a fried chicken place and I drew a chicken in my notes. She's like somewhat clumsily, but also somewhat seductively leaning out of the car and leaning into the drive-through window. And we're the Poplins and we want some chicken. And it's just, their accents were all so ridiculous, and
they're in the middle of Arkansas, so
that's true. There are some pretty crazy accents in there, but still, that was just the least part of it. But the rest of it, I felt played very comedically, and I was actually surprised to see that this was the first time that Steven Spielberg and John Williams collaborated. One of the greatest director composer collaborations in film history, like just throughout their careers, and it just did not feel like they were on the same page on this one. Did you guys feel that way at all, or am I totally off base here with it?
I totally agree. Getting off to a great start with our new head-to-head. We want to make sure we're not agreeing about everything. No, I agree with you 100% that tonally it's all over the place. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it an action movie? Because there's some, like the shootout at the car lot even is like, there's shades of Saving Private Ryan in that. When the young boy is like running away as the bullets are flying around him, I was like, oh my God, this looks like something from Saving Private Ryan.
But then that's also juxtaposed with like this weird sort of bumbling idiots of it's also they can't control the recoil of their weapons and all that.
Yes, it's the two fools in the Ferris wheel in 1941 on Omaha Beach is what's happening in that scene. It's incredibly tonally strange. It's interesting that he chose to do that. He's kind of freewheeling, doing everything, just kind of letting it all hang out, really. And I kind of like it, but I agree that it's odd. As far as looping it back to the theme, it's really not, to me, this movie, while it is a road movie, it's almost not, this might be my hot take for the whole thing. It's not really on the run. They're not on the run. They just so happen to take the cop hostage. Now,
just
I can
so
see Jeff already.
Well, that seemed like they literally have an entire line of police cars.
But they're not trying to escape the cops. They're not on the land. They're trying to go to
Mexico.
They're trying to get their baby first.
Well, yeah, but then they even ask them, they say, what are you going to do after you go? What are you going to do after the baby? This is we're going to Mexico.
They only come up with that, though, kind of in the middle of this. The plan, well, that's part of the thing. The two main characters are just kind of bumbling idiots. They don't really know what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Everyone in this movie is a bumbling idiot.
Well, that's true. That's fair.
Except for the sheriff. Or captain. He seems, actually, there's an interesting parallel here between the captain and Sugarland Express and Harvey Keitel.
Yes,
his character, and especially because both of them at the end points in the movie, when they know somebody's going to die, do their damnedest to make sure somebody does not die. Those are the only. I thought that was really something I did not even think about, but I thought that was a really interesting connection there.
In the midst of all these bumbling, awful, law enforcement personnel, they're like paragons of virtue. It's very one-dimensional. Both of them kind of are. Like they're very much the good cop. There's no bad to them. There's no well, yeah, they're one-dimensional. We can talk about them a little bit more, I think, in the chase scene part. But just going back to the family you choose thing, Thelma and Louise clearly wins in my mind, on that front,
Do you
and
think
on the run
that?
as well.
Yeah. Do you think that and this might be a recurring element of how we talk about these movies this week. Is there something to the fact that this is Spielberg's very first movie? Like he's at a natural disadvantage here, whereas Ridley Scott is
I was
already
thinking of that.
like Sugarland Express has all the, and you've both said this, like it's all these ideas that Spielberg. I was reminded of, even though this isn't the filmmaker we're talking about, the very first line of Roger Ebert's review of Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs was, now that we know the very talented Quentin Tarantino, now that he has made this movie, it's time for him to go make a better one. And I was reminded of that line
I like
so
that.
many times while Sugar. It's like it has this weird patchwork of all these things he did so much better at various points in his career. Whereas Ridley Scott, when he's doing Thelma and Louise, is already well into his career and is very seasoned and knows exactly what to do with these themes, particularly like the family you make. And it just feels like Spielberg is maybe not quite there. I feel like he's at a natural disadvantage just because of where this is in his filmography.
Yes, I think you're totally right. It's almost not fair to put these two movies together. They thematically do match up, but both directors are just in such different places that I think, yeah, Thelma and Louise has the upper hand, I think. And in the duel analogy, Ridley's got the high ground. Steven is down there. Hey, no one can see me on camera, but I was acting it out for you. Yeah, he's in a bad place in terms of a disadvantage when it comes to these two going head to head, just because it is his first movie. I agree with you.
Maybe
And
only one. I'm sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, and this may be something that we can get into a little bit more in the sort of characterization depiction of female characters, because you know, regardless of which movie it is, Ridley Scott has 18 additional years of forward societal progress, you know? So like when it comes to how you treat characters and especially how you treat women on screen, 1973 to 1991 is a big jump. Like there's a lot of change in there,
Yeah.
and just how society has viewed women. And so that, you know, regardless of when it is in his filmography, that is going to be an advantage that he has.
Well, and even with that, not only does he have that advantage, but, and this shows the level of progress, even with that, Thelma and Louise, part of the reason it was such a big deal at the time is because it was this female-led. I mean, like people literally talk about that movie. In film school, I watched Thelma and Louise as part of a class about feminist theory in film. Like it was such a crazy thing at the time. Like, wow, this is a completely female-dominated, almost sort of action movie with these two really strong women, but at the same time they have these sort of flaws, and it's just and Spielberg clearly is not ready to tackle anything like that, both in the year that he's making the movie and just at where he is in his career.
Yeah, but we're jumping categories here. But
we're jumping category. Well, let's move. Actually,
well,
one thing that I will say, Spielberg does have a little bit, and not so much an advantage, but I feel like the chase scenes, when we talk about visual storytelling, they are a little bit more even. I think that Thelma and Louise has the far more iconic level of them holding hands at the end, and there's no shot in anywhere in Sugarland Express that's going to equal that particular image. But I do feel like the chase scenes are composed pretty decently in Sugarland Express. That was actually one of the Zanuck being on set and commenting on that. There was actually an additional thing that I read that he had asked the cinematographer to start with really easy stuff so that Spielberg could kind of get used to it. And when he got there, Spielberg was like composing something that had to do with like this really complex chase element. And he was like, oh, he's doing great. It's fine. Like everything's going to be fine.
Is that right?
Yeah. I do feel like he does a little bit better. I'm not sure what you guys think. I mean, it's certainly not as much of a disadvantage as it is with the theme.
So are we in category 2 now? Because
yeah, we're in category. Talk about the chase scenes. Like, what do you think in terms of comparing those?
I agree with what you said. I visually, the Steven Spielberg, he's always been, elite at shots, framing shots, choosing which shots to use, getting experimental, and being unique, not repeating similar techniques too often. And he's just very, very creative. And I feel like even here, even though it's his first feature length movie, it's not on TV, he's already just so comfortable with it. One shot that completely, to me, is maybe the best shot in, I guess it's a sequence technically. It's multiple shots. Well, it actually is a one-shotter. But when the captain, the police captain, first comes up on the back of our two leads and the captive police officer, and there's this kind of silly sequence where they're talking to each other over the radio, even though they're 10 feet away in two different cars traveling next to each other. But there's this sequence where he takes, I think it's one shot looking from the front, and he goes all the way around the complete 360, and you get a view of all the characters in both cars, and it just kind of gives you a sense of not only does it establish what's happening, but kind of the situation of where people are in connection to each other, both as kind of literally spatially, but like kind of where they are kind of in this power struggle. I don't know. I thought it was one of the best shots in the whole thing.
That feels like a standard Spielberg thing to me. Like we talked about it in Duel. There's a shot that's just like that pulls up from the back of the car in Duel and then pans around as he's passing the truck. So you kind of see them both in there. We talked about in Minority Report, there's a similar shot, and because the technology has improved, he can actually like phase into the car, like that's something nobody does that shot better than Steven Spielberg. And I think especially that very first chase scene after they first steal the car and they're right before they crash the old people's car in Sugarland Express, like that was fantastic. That was a very well done, well edited scene. And Lou Jean / Goldie Hawn should be a rally driver. I know that wasn't her driving, but there was some. Find out who
the stunt driver was. By the way,
there were some damn good drifts going on in there to throw these cops off the trail.
Is this the one you're thinking? Is this the one where it kind of culminates there in the evening, and the one of the cop cars pulls out and then crashes another one behind them? And is that one thing?
No, it's at the very beginning. It's right before they crash the car into the creek.
Oh, yeah. Before they even take him hostage. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
there's so many good chase scenes in this movie.
Yeah. Now, I will say that I think Spielberg does better with the chase scenes. However, if we talk about visuals on its own, I think something really interesting that Ridley Scott did that I just like, I've seen Thelma and Louise before, but side note, one of the interesting things about this podcast is when we rewatch these movies, even movies that I've seen, because of how we're looking at them for this podcast, I'd noticed things that I didn't notice before, which is really cool. But and one of the things that I noticed here is the way he sets up the shots specifically between Thelma and Louise themselves. So as we talked about, the first category, the family you make, right? And those two clearly became, like sisters at the end. And they were obviously friends before at the very beginning when they started, but when things started to go bad, they were kind of on different, even before things started to go bad, when they were, I don't want to pull over yet. Let's pull over, that type of thing. But when they weren't on the same page as characters, the scenes were always set up so that they were like opposing each other. They were watching each other and they were rarely in the same frame. And he would flip back and forth, like at the diner scene and scenes in the car, and they were almost like confrontational. And then later, the more that we get through to the point where they're getting closer and closer to being on the same page and they're both having fun, they're both enjoying the trip, then we start to see the shots from the front of the car, right? And they're both in frame and they're both looking the same direction. And I don't know how intentional that was, and maybe just how much like there's only so many ways to shoot people in a car talking to each other and stuff, but it felt very intentional to me. And I thought that framing of it was really well done, to where I thought that it added an element that was missing from Sugarland Express.
Well, now that you mention it, that it's not just in the car. Later on in the movie, there's the scene where they're talking on the phone to Harvey Keitel's character, and the shot has them both in it. And you know, Thelma's kind of behind Louise, kind of supporting her, and they both look in the same direction. There's a couple kind of like that. The scene where they mess with the trucker and blow up his truck. There's the iconic shot from behind of them both sitting on the convertible, staring at him coming up, and they're both kind of in the same pose. And Thelma, one of them, has the kind of the gun stuck in her back pocket. They're in the same shot together, looking the same way. I think you're onto something there.
And they started to do that right before they pick up JD, and so they, you know, they're kind of on the same page. They're like, okay, let's do this, and you know, Thelma guilts Louise into doing it. But then they go in the diner the next morning, and then it's like, oh my God, you left him in the room with the money. Why did you do that? And that whole scene, they're looking at each other and they're not shown in the same shot. So it even like switched. And that was kind of where I was like, this has to be intentional.
There's another thing.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I'll just hit this real quick. There's another interesting thing. I can't take credit for noticing this, but Jeff, you shared a couple articles on the Criterion website. There's a Criterion edition of this, and one of the writers had a very interesting point here. It's Jessica King in the article "How the West Was Won." Anyway, I can't take credit for this, but they say for the entire last hour of the movie, this is almost a quote, I'm paraphrasing her article, but Thelma and Louise are shown indoors only 3 times. Once in CCTV footage, twice when they make phone calls. Each instance is instrumental in getting them caught. Interiors and homely protections that they promise are a trap. It's only outdoors that they're actually truly themselves. And you know, that's another great way that, if intentional, that, you know, they used visual storytelling to really kind of show this transition and show what really matters for these 2 women, and this, you know, the true situation that they're in.
I think that what we're almost describing is how Spielberg is using the visual storytelling in this movie to basically get coverage so that you know where all the characters are physically. The other shot that I really liked in Sugarland Express is when the captain is behind him, and in the top half of the frame, you see his eyes in his rear view mirror. The bottom half of the frame is looking forward into the car in front. It's a great shot.
Really cool. That was really cool.
It's a really great shot because it's coverage. It's showing where all 4 of these main characters are at the same time.
And it's split screen without using the gimmick of a split screen.
Yes,
right?
That's exactly what it is. So it's inventive, but what you're describing with Ridley Scott is that his visual storytelling is also telling a thematic story. There's a purpose to it beyond just coverage in terms of we need to establish where people literally are physically in a car. And I think that shows, again, a little bit more, and again, Spielberg's at a disadvantage this week, but a little bit more of a director's maturity in terms of what he's trying to do visually, that he's literally telling a thematic story with how he is framing these particular characters. Spielberg is great, and again, he's very inventive. He's not telling any kind of thematic story with the coverage of these characters. He's literally trying to tell you where they are in the car at any given time. And I think that is a real clear difference when you're looking at their visual storytelling in these 2 movies.
That's a really good point, because when when I think about the greatest, like the best visual shots from Sugarland Express, you know, my beyond the car chases, what sticks out to me is the scene where they're setting up the snipers in the foster home when they're getting ready for Lugene and Clovis to come and possibly shoot them down, you know, and they're very carefully moving all the objects in the house, and sort of just like they're taking away this idea of home, right? And there's a little bit of theme there, but it's just not on the same level quite yet, because then a lot of it is just juxtaposing the shots through the scope of them coming down the road and that kind of a thing. And it looks really cool and it's really well done. And they kind of get there with just like sort of taking over this home, because it's sort of taking that idea of taking home away from this supposed family, but it just doesn't quite get there at the same level, if you ask me.
And I think I started by talking about this particular shot. What's the most iconic shot from either of these movies? It's the reason that we remember Thelma and Louise holding hands in the car is because that's the conclusion of a story. That's a visual conclusion of what their story is. That's why it's so iconic. Because even though it's a relatively innocent physical gesture, it has this great meaning. They're going over, they're going over this edge with each other, and it's very it's very profound and it's very emotional for them as it's a very real embrace to them when they hold hands like that. That's why we remember that shot, because of the visual storytelling that has led up to them embracing in that way.
And I think another thing that I remember too from the movie from Sugarland Express that visually was, had some thematic elements to it was the scene where they're staying overnight in the RV, in the used car lot, and they see like some random person watching TV there's like a drive-in theater. Is it TV? Wasn't sure what that was.
Couldn't figure that out either, but yeah, they're watching cartoons.
They're able to, they're watching cartoons, watching Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner cartoons. And at one point they're focusing on Clovis, and you see the Roadrunner cartoon happening in a reflection on the glass superimposed over his face. And the Wile E. Coyote is, doing his thing where he just fails completely, and he's always destined to fail. And you see Clovis, who was having, up to that point, they were having a good time laughing with each other and watching the cartoon. And he gets this solemn look over his face, and you see it turn from laughing to just completely solemn and sadness. And it's this idea that, he's Wile E. Coyote. That's his life. And he's destined to fail, and he knows he'll fail because that's all he has. That's all he's meant for. And it's like, that was good, but at the same time, like maybe a little too on the nose. And that's one of those things where I can definitely, that comes back to Spielberg being at the disadvantage, being so young in his career when he does this. I think maybe modern day Spielberg, or even Spielberg of 10, 15 years later, would have handled that shot differently, or that scene differently. But yeah, that's it.
Well, and I think that scene also, that's a good demonstration of kind of the distinction that y'all are talking about too, between using the shots to tell a story versus having cool shots and the story going on kind of simultaneously. So that particular shot that you're talking about, where you're seeing the cartoon reflected off the screen in front of Clovis's face, you could get the same effect of Clovis seeing himself in this character without actually having the reflection shot. You know what I mean? If you just had the camera behind his shoulder, seeing what he's seeing, and then a shot just of him without the reflection. But Spielberg puts in the reflection shot. I don't know why he did it, but basically because it's a cool looking shot, right? I don't think that extra added layer there has another storytelling aspect to it. Whereas it seems like not everything, but most things that Ridley Scott's doing in his movie, like every single thing has a weighted purpose and a presence. Do you agree?
I think I do. And I mean, I think if I'm to say overall, I think that, especially with certain elements of Sugarland Express, there are things that are more impressive visually and maybe more technically good or better. And especially like the scene where the night chase, right, where they're waiting at the gas station, and the captain is in his car, and they have a shot really low from the ground, and they're showing the car, and there's a street light on the opposite street, and it's casting the car in shadow, and then there's this big light around it, and you see the exhaust fuming from out of the car. I mean, that was a fantastic, just really great shot. So stuff like that, like, it's really good looking. It's very technically impressive. But in terms of like thematic elements of telling a story visually, I don't think Spielberg is quite there yet in his career, and I think Ridley Scott is at this point with this movie. And you know, I would even venture to say though that even with Spielberg and his career and how far he would come from Sugarland Express, I still don't think even today, I don't think he could make a movie like Thelma and Louise. I just don't know that that's something that's in his wheelhouse. I mean, you guys feel that way?
I think some of his internalized mother issues would preclude it. Which, hey, that might be a segue towards the
Well,
next
and that's
topic.
exactly what I was going to say, is that if we talk about their treatment of women, I'm not so sure that Spielberg, of course, we're three guys. I mean, we should preface that we're
Who
just like
better
three
to
men.
discuss?
Yeah.
Who better
the
to
inner
discuss
workings
the
of women?
the treatment of women? I'm not so sure that Spielberg, that there is poor treatment of women in films. I think that he just tends to go out of his way to not really focus on female characters. It's interesting that if you look at his filmography, after he makes this one, in which the main character is a woman, it's another 10 years, more than 10 years, until he gets to The Color Purple and focuses on female protagonists. After that, it's Jaws, very masculine. You have Close Encounters of the Third Kind there, mostly male characters. 1941, as we discussed in that episode, that's probably the real peak of the
Bit
what I'll just call
problematic.
misogynistic overtones. I mean, just some very, very problematic depictions of women in that movie. And so, yeah, he goes like another decade before he even takes a crack at trying to do a female-focused story. Again, then after that, there's just not a lot in his filmography. Whereas Ridley Scott, he has, he has Alien, he has this movie, which is like, again, I watched and discussed this movie in a feminist theory class. He has G.I. Jane. He has these movies with very, very strong female characters, and he's interested, at least, in depicting women and female protagonists throughout his career. It's different. And again, I'm not so sure that Spielberg, other than 1941, I'm not so sure that Spielberg is depicting women incorrectly or inappropriately. I just think he kind of sometimes goes out of his way to not really depict women in stories.
One of the biographies I was reading, it said that it was talking about this kind of undercurrent, and it said something to the effect of, it's not so much misogyny, but almost a fear and a unwillingness to engage with. And I think that kind of makes some sense. Sorry, Jeff, I stepped on your toes there.
No, you're good, because I was essentially wanted to go along the same lines, where it's one thing to just not have or to have female characters. And I guess I can't speak exactly to Color Purple because I actually have not seen that movie. But it's one thing to have like a woman as your central character focus, and then it's another thing to have a woman and her own femininity, her own womanhood as a central component of their character, right? Like, because even Ripley from Alien, she happens to be a woman, and we talked about in that episode, it was written genderless, and then they cast a woman to be in that character. And so there's nothing specifically about Ripley that is like about being a woman, right? But Thelma and Louise and G.I. Jane to a different degree, is specifically calls out about about how they are women and how they deal with that in society, in places, in roles, in scenarios where women usually aren't, and women usually aren't in these sort of, they're not the gangsters on the run type of people like in Thelma and Louise, wanted in multiple states and all this kind of a thing. And they're not, they're not Navy SEALs like in G.I. Jane, and how that is a factor and a very important part of those stories. So even beyond just having a woman as your lead actor or character in a movie, having it focus so much on their womanhood is something that Ridley Scott has at least some interest in, and has tackled in his career that Spielberg has stayed away from. Even with, again, I guess I don't know, Nate, have you seen The Color Purple? Does that is it? I don't want to step on my
Color
point here.
Purple, it's been a long time since I've seen it. It is very and it's funny now that we're talking about it, because of this, it is really different than anything else in his filmography, because it is a very female-centered story.
Yeah, it's almost what the exception that proves the rule, right? That's saying.
Yeah, and it's also obviously very grounded in the African American experience in this country, which is not something that Steven Spielberg goes about tackling a lot. It is kind of an interesting outlet. I just look at, and again, I'm not trying to like nitpick Spielberg. I'm not saying that his treatment of women is altogether bad. It's not. It's just like, as I'm looking through his filmography here, like, women are often depicted as, I mean, I could literally go through of like the nagging wives of his filmography. I mean,
Well,
Jaws, you get it a little bit. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you get it a little bit.
a lot.
I mean,
Terry
a
Garr's
lot.
character, she like leaves him, and that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then even that, right? Besides the nagging wife, right? Then all of a sudden, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is one of the absolute weirdest bits where he meets this other woman who had the same close encounter that he did, right? And then, like, he's still married. Like 2 days ago, he was living with his family, and then they have this great connection. And at one point, they like make out underneath the alien spaceship, and then they just like go their separate ways, and nothing is ever said again. It's so bizarre, and it's like this woman is just this throwaway thing for him to have this sort of sexual awakening at this one single point, and then that's it. It's so bizarre.
I'm literally going through it. You see it in Hook. You see it in AI, artificial intelligence, where the mom is almost the villain and like gives the, like, literally throws the little artificial intelligence boy away. It's just, you kind of keep going. It's in War of the Worlds. Even though Tom Cruise's character is like kind of a piece of shit dad, like the wife is almost depicted as kind of this nagging, oh well, I'm gonna drop the kids off. It's just, you kind of see it's.
Even in Bridge of Spies, it was a little bit. And that movie is like less than 10 years old.
You almost see it a little bit in The Fabelmans, which is
almost
about his parents.
Yeah, it's
like,
1,000,000% in The Fabelmans. That's what the movie's about, almost.
Like, and it's exactly like the whole thing is about the failing of his mother to come to grips with the death of her mother. And, and then she has this affair that he discovers while making a movie, which I think is fictionalized a little bit. I'm not sure Steven Spielberg actually discovered his mother having an affair by shooting a movie. But you just see, I don't know, you see that a lot. I'm not trying. You see it in Catch Me If You Can. There's like the nagging wife who kind of she's at fault for the divorce, and that's why the Frank Abagnale character, the Leo character, as I'm really starting to think through it, I'm not trying to nitpick Spielberg.
But that's not even a nitpick, right? Like that's a legitimate criticism. We're not talking about a nitpick.
I'm bringing up multiple movies. I'm bringing up multiple movies where women are depicted as kind of this, oh, you boys, like, I'm E.T.
You didn't even bring up E.T. either, and the mom is just that's the frazzled mom. It's the same in Duel even.
Yeah. There's something about
harpy wife, the way she's acting. Yeah.
And what I love about Thelma and Louise that's so different about that's really so enlightening, is that these characters are like, they're very different characters, and I love that they are female characters, that particularly the Gina Davis character. Is Gina Davis Thelma?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So the Thelma character, she herself is very flawed. She's a very, very flawed person. She's clearly way too trusting. She, she kind of gets pushed. She allows herself to get pushed around by this really asshole husband. She has all these things, but like, that's I don't know. There's something about it that feels very true and unforced, that like, women are people too, and women can be flawed, and we don't need to have this perfect representation.
She's almost childlike.
Yes, she's almost childlike, but it's juxtaposed with the Louise character, who's just very strong-willed, and she's kind of the one who's always coming up with the plan of what they're going to do next. It just seems very honest and open and refreshing. And when I look at Spielberg's filmography, I don't see a lot of depictions of women. Honestly, the only one that I can really think of that jumps right off of the Wikipedia filmography to me is the Ellie Sattler character in Jurassic Park. She's kind of the one that is maybe a little bit of an exception of like she's very independent and she kind of has her own agenda and she's clearly very smart and she's not depicted like all these other women are depicted in his movies as like, oh, I'm just
Yeah.
so frazzled. It's like I mean, it almost feels like she should have been, if it hadn't been for like a book, like if that would have been depicted in a typical Spielberg way, she would have been like, she already would have been Alan Grant's wife, and she would have been like mad that they were going on this excursion to Jurassic Park, you know?
Why would you?
And then,
why would you do this for us? Why would you?
why would
make
you
it
do that? And then she would probably have to be like saved in the end. And whereas like she's kind of the one, Ellie Sattler kind of does a lot of the saving. Yeah. So
but even she, it's almost, again, the exception that proves the rule. Have you guys, Jeff, I know you have because we've talked about it. Have you heard of the Bechdel test?
Mm-hmm.
Nate, have you heard of this?
yes, this is the test where, for our listeners, if you don't know what that is, it's where a movie passes the test if it has and correct me if I'm wrong, you have to have two female characters have a conversation in a movie that is not in any way related to one of the male characters. Then it passes the Bechdel test.
Yes,
yeah.
And we should give credit so that we're not stealing it. It's named after an American cartoonist named Alison Bechdel. So props to her. But I think, does a single Steven Spielberg movie that we've talked about on this show meet that? I don't know that it does.
Is there a single? Maybe The Color Purple, but
is
there a single Steven Spielberg movie where two women talk to each other about a man or not?
Color Purple, which I have not seen in a very long time, I feel very confident in saying it passes it. That is the only one that I can say with confidence. Even has I'm trying to think now of scenes in Spielberg movies where two women talk.
It's kind of stunning,
guys. Right? Yeah, like that's. I mean, I can kind of see why people have had this issue for a while.
And Ridley Scott is, this is probably just a symptom of Hollywood, and how male-centric it is in our society just in general. But he's no paragon of femininity.
Yeah, he's not
either when you're looking at his list. But he does have way more powerful women. Obviously, this movie clearly passes the test. It is like the shining example of it, right? But he also has strong women, like we've talked about, Alien, G.I. Jane. But even think about The Last Duel, which just came out. The whole movie is about a woman who they don't take her word for it when she says she was sexually assaulted. And the movie is told in, from three different points of view. And that's literally the basis of the whole freaking movie. Can you see Steven Spielberg telling that story? I don't know that I can. So, I think Ridley Scott definitely wins this round too. If this was an actual duel in this series or in this episode, poor Steven Spielberg is laying there bleeding out with like multiple stab wounds, and Ridley is like untouched.
I'm looking. So I want to give them credit. IndieWire has an article that says The Color Purple passes the Bechdel test, but how many other Steven Spielberg movies do? And then it goes through. It does give Jurassic Park a technical pass because,
which is the best kind of pass.
Yeah, that's obviously.
Is it because Ellie talks to Lex? That's
exactly what it is.
Oh my god,
that's exactly
a literal child.
That's exactly what it is. It gives a narrow pass to. It gives a lot of narrow passes. It gives a narrow pass to E.T. Because the mother it talks to her daughter Gertie, played by Drew Barrymore.
Again, a child.
They have a couple conversations that are not about any male figure. It's really this is what I'm saying. Like, it gives War of the Worlds a pass because there's like a brief conversation between
Woman Soldier 1. Run!
No,
Woman Soldier.
It's literally like a brief moment where the mother character talks to the daughter character played by Dakota Fanning.
Oh my god!
And it's like, okay, you have a good weekend. Like, that's the thing that gets it.
And stuff like that entirely misses the point of the test, right?
Yes, it does.
Like,
Because
a technical pass is not different than the actual what the test is trying to draw attention to.
Yeah, it also gives a narrow pass to The Lost World because there are conversations between The Jeff Goldblum character, his daughter sneaks on, and then
Yeah,
the
child.
Julianne Moore character has some conversation.
Wow,
Again,
that's stunning.
that's not the point of the test. The
That's
point of the
really
test is not to
stunning.
pass through on a minor technicality. So really, it's only The Color Purple that has significant scenes with two female characters talking about the conversation is not about a male character.
I
Yeah,
feel like we
and I'm
could
trying to
subtitle this episode "Three White Men Discover the Patriarchy." More
Well,
at 11.
I'm trying to go through and look at Ridley Scott's to see how much. Obviously, Thelma and Louise, and does Alien?
I don't think so. I mean, if so, it's the two female characters talking about the friggin' alien. I mean,
Yeah, but I don't know if that actually happened or not. I can't remember. Black
G.I.
Rain, I haven't
Jane.
seen
It's
that.
been forever since I've seen that.
I haven't seen it.
Does she talk with many other women? I mean, kind of the whole point of the movie is she's in a male-dominated.
She's the only
space.
one, yeah.
And what's interesting is now that we start to talk about Ridley Scott, other than Thelma and Louise, a lot of his movies with the female characters are more about those female characters being in male-dominant parts of society.
I mean, Hannibal as well, right? Clarice,
Yep.
same deal.
Yeah.
Is she? Although that one may have passed. That's because didn't she have like a? I don't know.
He's got Thelma and Louise though, so they can't take that from him.
That's true.
Hey,
the counselor, right? We had the Cameron Diaz and Penelope Cruz talked about a ring. That's not a man.
Am I wearing a hard hat?
Does it?
That count? Does that count? It
Ring-
passed.
ring
According
clearly has
to
no
according to
symbolism
IndieWire, that would pass for sure.
So one thing I texted you guys after we watched these movies, I said, Thelma and Louise, are we sure this movie was directed by Ridley Scott? Because in my mind, despite the fact that he's more well known as a director who deals in sometimes feminist, has strong female characters, etc. In my mind, he had a stretch when I was quote coming up where like almost all his movies just had nothing really to do. They definitely didn't pass the Bechdel test. So, your Black Hawk Downs, he did a Matchstick Men, but Kingdom of Heaven, American Gangster, Body of Lies, Robin Hood, Exodus, a lot of these are, real manly man movies, Gladiator, of course. And so I'm like, this guy that directed Black Hawk Down, which I think has no female speaking parts, maybe one of the wives at home picks up a phone and is like, "Are you there?" That might be literally it. But this guy directed Thelma and Louise. That's where I was coming from. But after we kind of look at it, he does kind of have the chops, at least when we're looking at it from the skewed perspective of Hollywood, right? I mean, in a true, completely balanced society, if everything wasn't completely skewed one way, then yeah, of course he's not some paragon of virtue either. But for Hollywood, it seems like he's doing a pretty decent job.
Yeah, and there were two main things that I thought after seeing Thelma and Louise again. And number one, I'd already mentioned, which is that I don't think Steven Spielberg could ever make this movie, even today. Number two is that I had forgotten. It'd been a long time since I'd seen Thelma and Louise, and I'd always just kind of watched it because it was this famous movie that you should watch. And so that was my impetus for watching it before, but watching it now with a bit more of a critical eye for this podcast, it's really good. It is one of his best movies, I think, and it is. I was kind of surprised myself about how, I always remembered it just because kind of the famous. It's almost like I don't even know that I remembered how much watching it. I just remember everyone else remembering it, right? Like just because of all the famous scenes and they did a spoof in one of the Wayne's World movies, right, about how the ending to their movie should be like the Thelma and Louise ending, and that kind of a thing. It's just a part of pop culture. And so, how much was actually my memory of seeing it, and how much is just my memory of all this stuff that's steeped in pop culture from this one particular movie? But watching it again, I was just like, man, this is a really good movie, and I see why it was nominated for so many awards. And I was that was kind of a nice little surprise for me. So if you want my final vote, I think I'd tip the cap to Ridley Scott this week.
I think we've got to almost be unanimous. I'd be shocked if Steve said Steven Spielberg. I feel like Ridley Scott clearly wins the day here.
Yeah. This is okay. Using the dual imagery, this is in Monty Python and the Holy Grail when King Arthur fights the Black Knight. Ridley Scott is King Arthur in this one, and Steven Spielberg is the poor Black Knight. Now, again, Sugarland Express is a technically very well-made film. It was entertaining, even. I enjoyed the time I spent with it. But yeah, the three themes or the three categories just sliced and diced. Ridley Scott all the way. And like you said, Jess, I'd never seen this movie, and it's instantly like maybe one of my favorite movies. It's a fantastic movie.
I did not realize how much I liked it. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah,
I think that something might help us a little bit in the coming weeks. And Jeff, I'll let you preview what's to come. But just quick teaser: the next 2 weeks we have movies that are paired that they were made at roughly the same time. What really hurt Spielberg here is that this was like so much earlier, and it was early in his career. We've got, the war movies are Saving Private Ryan and Black Hawk Down, which were made a few years apart, and then Catch Me If You Can and Matchstick Men, which came out like a few months apart from each other. So I think we might get away. I think those might pair a little bit better just because we won't be able to look at one of them and say like, well, he was so young and it was such a new thing, and he hadn't really figured out how to do a lot of stuff yet. They're both going to be pretty firmly in command of their subject material when they're doing those.
I'm looking forward to especially the second pairing.
Yeah,
it's going to be very fascinating.
And that is our lead into next week. So I think what are we at now? Are we at? Is it 5 or is it 4-4 now?
I've lost count
because this is the 8th week. Yeah, it's 4-4 now.
I was going to say I think that tied it back up. I think it's 4.
We did not plan it this way, people.
Ridley Scott won for the Duelist.
We really did not.
Yeah, we
honestly didn't put that much thought into like putting the themes where we did.
Yeah, we kind of wanted some of the popular movies up front. We did Duel and Duelist first just because it was our first movie.
Right.
So yeah, but we're at 4-4.
3 idiots stumbling towards brilliance.
Yes, and next week
4. Sorry, Brandon. Don't want to leave out the
next week might be our dare I say toughest week, at least the toughest since Jaws vs. Alien, but Saving Private Ryan versus Black Hawk Down. Both movies that were nominated for Best Picture, both movies where they were nominated for Best Director, both very, very brutal and important war movies made 3 years apart. 2 years? 3 years apart. So, yeah, next week will be war movies. But so anyway, if you guys like the new format, everyone out there, right? Thank you. The fans have spoken. You have been heard, and this is what you get. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other suggestions, please feel free. We've shown that we will take them to heart. So we appreciate everyone who does listen and gives us feedback of any kind. So if you have any more, go ahead and give them to us. Steve, hit us with the socials on where they can get it to us.
I literally just closed the outline. It's
Duel of the Greats on all that.
Duel of the Greats at gmail.com is our email. Please email us. Our mailbag, I think currently is empty. There's a lot of spam in there. Anyway, duelofthegreats at gmail.com. And then on all the general socials, except for TikTok, we are at Duel of the Greats. And on TikTok, we are at Duel Podcast, I believe. Brandon, is that right? I feel like you're always Johnny on the spot with that.
Right. That's a thumbs up from Brandon. So hit us on any of the socials if you guys have any more suggestions or what you like, don't like. So with that, we'll wrap up the show this week. Thank you all so much for listening this week, and be sure to come back next week for our war movie week, Saving Private Ryan versus Black Hawk Down. Until then, we'll see you next week. Thanks for stopping by.